Hello, welcome to the Nerdy Folks Podcast, a conversation about the nerdy things we love and the things that matter most. My name is Matthew Seipel-Anderson.
And I am Katie Seipel-Anderson.
We are the hosts of the Nerdy Folks Podcast. We love this community, and we're glad you're with us, of course, because we're talking about Lord of the Rings. And not the movies, the books.
The books, which I have never read. I've seen the movies multiple times, I think. Yes, multiple times.
And you've read...
I've read The Hobbit.
The Hobbit.
But I have never read The Lord of the Rings.
So this is a treat. We're reading them together, which is something we haven't done in a long time. And Katie has wanted to read books together, but I've always been, a sourpuss about it. But now that we're reading one that I want to do, of course.
Of course, now he's okay with it.
But before we get too much into the books and all that and some other things that we have to go along with the books, let me give you a little news. I feel like I should use my really sporty voice for this part. All right, everybody. Coming up, Star Wars Acolyte. June 4th, mark your calendar. Flex your muscles. Ugh.
I think by sporty, you mean like wrestling.
I don't know where I was going with that. But Star Wars Acolyte is on the horizon June 4th, so check it out. We'll be talking about it here on the show. Rings of Power Season 2 is coming out August 29th. So
pretty excited about that one.
End of the summer. That will be awesome, especially because we'll be on this big Lord of the Rings kick. And Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim is coming out December 13th, so right at the end of the year. And that's animated.
Trying to bring in that younger generation.
Yeah. So as I understand it, Warner Brothers still owns the rights to do Lord of the Rings movies with a certain amount of the source material. And then Amazon has the rights to do TV, and they have their own little piece of the source material to work with. And they're both going to be creating content over the next, 5 years.
So the big question is, are they going to collaborate with each other to create a cohesive storyline? Or are they just going to both go rogue and do their own thing?
My prediction? They're going to go rogue.
See, if they could collaborate, I think they would actually make more money and everyone would be happier.
Agreed. But there is talk of Peter Jackson returning with Warner Brothers, so that will be cool. 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky. 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls of stone. 9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie.
So not short or obvious, actually.
As I read chapter 1, I couldn't help but be reminded of some people in my life, because chapter 1 really introduces us to the hobbits and the goodness of the Shire and Gandalf, and he's this winsome but kind of stern character.
And kind of the pettiness of their life a little bit. It reminds me a little of like a Jane Austen novel with how he describes characters. You can just get like a taste of who the character is in a kind of a funny, witty way.
And we've lived in small towns now, some, and definitely reminds us of small town life. At least it does for me. I was reminded of my grandfather, actually. He was just this kind of quirky guy, but very lovable, had a big personality, had a garage on his property that was up in the woods a little bit away from the house that was full of junk because he would take apart things for scrap metal.
Treasures.
Yeah, we called it the Trail of Treasures because it was this trail just lined with stuff in the woods. And
I kind of think the Hobbit treasures were maybe a little treasury.
Better.
Just more your average, typical treasure.
But that garage was kind of like his hobbit hole. Up in the woods among the green and the singing birds and the crickets, there's my grandpa. Smile on his face, taking apart a motor to get the copper wire out or something weird like that.
Well, Gandalf reminds me a little of David Crowder.
Yes, I could see that. The eyebrows and the
The
beard
beard.
and the bushiness,
I guess.
the witty comments.
Yeah.
So in chapter 1, we also get to be a part of the Party of Special Magnificence. And it was fun reading about this. There was a line in here where it talks about people were grumbling because things weren't being bought locally. At least people didn't think they were. And then the orders poured in and everybody was happy because Bilbo bought from all the local merchants. And in our town, there was a situation recently where a local garbage company was bought out by an outside company. And so where I work, everyone switched their garbage service from the new company to a different local company.
Gotta keep it local.
Gotta keep it local. Katie, can you think of any parties of special magnificence that you've been a part of?
When I was a paralegal, I was invited to some higher class parties where things were a little more opulent than usual. I remember one time I was invited to like an art auction, and I walked in and I was like, whoa. It's very different atmosphere than I was used to. Definitely could not afford any of the art, but it was fun to be a part of, to see how those in a different station in life lived.
It was a fun time in life because we were just married. We didn't make any money, and we would get invited to these law firm events. Like we got invited to the country club one time for a dinner, and I was so nervous that I went to the fancy men's clothing store downtown and I bought like a $50 tie. And I look back now and I'm like, it was so silly. I mean, there's nothing wrong with buying a $50 tie, but at the time, that was like not the smartest way to use $50, and nobody cared.
So in this chapter, we also just get this little taste or thread of kind of the darkness lingering with that ring. It's kind of this ominous, wait a second, what's going on? Like a darker thing it was just kind of touched on.
There's definitely some foreshadowing, especially when it comes to Bilbo and his reaction to Gandalf wanting him to leave the ring behind. And it's fun in the book because they develop that conversation a bit more.
Yeah, and Frodo's just kind of bantering with Gandalf and saying, hey, you have to leave so soon, whatever. And then he's like, wait, you're being very mysterious. What are you afraid of? You can almost just like feel this little like, wait, what's going on here? And Gandalf is like, I'm not certain, so I'm not going to say anymore.
There's some interesting wisdom in Gandalf's response, I think, because a lot of times in our day-to-day lives, we like to just air everything that's on our minds when we're really not certain of it. So being able to...
I think of headlines right now. There's all these like doom and gloom headlines that you can find, especially if you tend to be drawn to that stuff now in this day of social media and how you can create this echo chamber for yourself. Like just the negative headlines are, oh, this is going to happen, that is going to happen, when truly people don't often know that at all. They just spout out headlines. But the way this book kind of references it, it's obviously not this like spouting out of something bad, doom and gloom coming, but you just get a little taste of it with, oh, Gandalf is leaving and he's unusually bent, almost like he's carrying a great weight.
It also pulls back the curtain and gives us a peek into the character of Gandalf and the importance of his life's work and what he's really doing out there in the wider world.
See this little like nuance between this like especially kind of jolly, funny, witty Hobbiton world that is kind of silly and definitely brings out characters that we have in real life that we see. But then you have this like thread at the end where you're like, ooh, I can tell this one's going to be more serious than like The Hobbit was. So Matt, do you have like a favorite quote from the book?
I do. There's a quote from Bilbo.
I should say, wait. Do you have a favorite quote from the first chapter?
Yes, I'd say this might even be one of my favorite of the book, although as we read this more carefully and think about discussion, I'll probably find some other great quotes, but here's a quote from Bilbo that I remember from previous readings, and I'll read it again. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whither then, I cannot say. To me, that reminds me of that draw to the future and that draw to discover life's purpose that I think we all feel. And the Bible even says in Ecclesiastes 3:11, He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in our heart. And so I think there's this sense of a future that's pulling us forward. And, of course, when you're young, that's a natural thing. You're excited to discover what life has for you. But even Bilbo, in his late years, at 111 years old, he's still feeling this pull to the future. And I think that, in part, is that eternity that God's put inside of our heart and that draw to God. How about you? Do you have a quote that you enjoyed?
Well, let me just tie my favorite quote into that. I don't know if this is really my favorite quote. I went for like a more lighthearted quote than you did apparently. My favorite is from Gandalf when he's leaving and talking to Frodo about like when he's going to come back or whatever, and he's like, "Expect me when you see me." I feel like that's a little like God sometimes. God shows up in unexpected ways, and then you see God. And I was like, "Expect me when you see me." Okay, how do I take that?
I feel like that's going to be a quote to use in an email in the future.
Well, you can expect me when you see me.
Yeah.
Totally going to use that with my kids.
Yeah. When you get come, Mom.
You can expect me when you see me.
That's fantastic. Well, I am going to post some of these things from our show notes today into a comment on our Facebook group. So it's the Nerdy Folks group on Facebook. We want to connect with you as we read through Lord of the Rings. We want to hear what you think and would love to include some of those quotes in the next episode. We'll be reading Chapter 2 next week and cannot wait to get into it and cannot wait to have you guys a part of it. Well, if you want to connect with us, head over to nerdyfolks.com. Until next time, love ya, take care, God bless, and bye-bye.